Hello and welcome into another episode of Locked On Wolves. Today on the show, Summer League is winding down. What's the update on the Timberwolves' final roster spot that they must fill before the start of the season? Has Summer League had any impact on it? Plus, what to look for next in the Wolves offseason? It's all coming. Welcome in. You are Locked On Wolves.
You are Locked On Timberwolves, your daily Minnesota Timberwolves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Wolves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Beecken. I am the host of Locked On Wolves. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy weekend. And happy end of Las Vegas Summer League, I guess. I don't know. We'll talk about that here in a second. Today of the show, we'll touch a bit on Summer League, although we're not all the way done. That'll still be something we wrap up early next week. But I want to talk about the Wolves' final roster spot, and has Summer League had any impact on the spot they must fill? They've actually got two spots, but what direction are they leaning? Do we know? Does Summer League have any is there any indication that Summer League could impact them? Could anybody from the Summer League roster get that spot or get it two-way? Are they going to sign a big? Are they going to sign a guard? Who's still out there on the market? What's happened recently in the NBA free agent market, and how has that potentially impacted the Wolves' decision-making? We'll also talk about what's upcoming next this summer, like what to look out for. We're 2 months away from training camp. What happens between now and then? So a lot to talk about here on the show today. First, though, a big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. Okay, so Summer League. The Timberwolves have one more Summer League game. They did finish 4-0. They were one of 6 teams to finish 4-0. A reminder, though, that the way the Summer League works is only the top 4 teams advance to what is a 2-round playoff, a semifinal and the championship. So the tiebreaker for 6 undefeated teams is point differential. Minnesota was 5th in point differential at a plus 9.5. So they finished ahead of the 4-0 Hawks at a plus 8. But the top 4 teams are Toronto, Oklahoma City, Charlotte, and Sacramento. So the Wolves do get a consolation game. Everybody still gets a game. The Wolves play on Saturday afternoon, so tomorrow at 4:30. So what we're going to do early next week is Monday will basically be a post-game pod from Saturday. I'm going to try not to make too many declarative statements about Summer League overall. We'll save that for Tuesday. Tuesday, we'll talk about, like, hey, here's the takeaways from Summer League. Here's what we thought we knew headed into Summer League that is true based on these 5 games. Here's things that are different. Here are things that are encouraging. Here are things that might be discouraging. We'll do all that on Monday and Tuesday between those two shows. Today, though, I want to shift a little bit and focus on that final roster spot the Wolves must fill. They've got 2 open roster spots and 1 open 2-way contract spot. They have to fill one of their 2 open standard contract spots. Now, I don't think they'll fill both. I think they'll just fill one based on what Tim Connelly has done to this point in his career with the Wolves. So I think they'll just fill one spot. We've debated on this show previously, like, is it a big? Is it a guard? I mean, on the one hand, the Timberwolves have lost Nickeil Alexander-Walker, guard/wing, right? On the other hand, they've lost Luka Garza and Josh Minott, who both effectively function. I mean, Garza was a 5 and Minott basically played the 4 when he played. So, and layer on top of that, Nickeil, yes, guard/wing, but he also was the backup point guard last year. The Wolves haven't traditionally had a backup point guard. In Tim Connelly's time in Minnesota, like, Jordan McLaughlin was really kind of the 3rd string backup point guard and only played rotation minutes when he was forced to. And we've seen them kind of try and slice and dice the backup point guard role in a variety of different ways. And when I say that, I don't mean like truly a backup point guard. Like Nickeil wasn't either, right? That's just what he played because he had to. But I mean, Shake Milton, like Monte Morris, I guess, would have been the midseason acquisition to have a backup point guard. And when I say this, I like to be clear. I don't think they're necessarily going to go out and find, I know Jordan McLaughlin went back to San Antonio, but they're not going to find like a Monte Morris to be the backup point guard. It's who's going to be the guy that operates the offense with the second unit, and especially when Anthony Edwards is off the floor. It's true that what they really need is somebody who can operate next to Anthony Edwards and initiate offense to allow him to get off the ball and be a second side attacker when Ant is inevitably blitzed beyond Julius Randle. Like, Julius is obviously the first option when it comes to that. But is there someone else that can attack the second side, which is a Rob Dillingham type, or somebody who can run offense while Ant plays off the ball, which is also, in theory, what Rob Dillingham could do? So it doesn't have to be actually a backup point guard, but there are also, 12, 16 minutes plus during a game where Ant's off the floor. And you need somebody to create. I know that's oftentimes Julius Randle, but when it's just Julius on the floor or just Ant on the floor, you still need another guy. Like, you need a third player that could do that sort of thing, which, again, Rob Dillingham has the ceiling to do that. And the hope is that Rob Dillingham could be that guy. Is there someone left on the free agency market that could fill that role? Or is it going to have to be, hey, we're going to sign, backup big, Precious Achiuwa or whatever. I'm just throwing a name out there. And and we're going to rely on Rob Dillingham to be that guy, or TJ Shannon to be that guy if they believe he can operate that way in the half court. And we'll talk in a minute about how Summer League may have or may not have impacted the thinking here. But that's what you're looking for. You're looking for that third guy in addition to Ant and Julius Randle. And Naz Reid can be that guy, but usually when Julius and Naz are on the floor together, that's not really how the Wolves are functioning. And they need somebody who can play out of the backcourt and do that can play with Ant when Julius is on the bench, or that can play instead of Ant when Ant is on the bench and be that guard creator from the perimeter while Julius Randle's on the floor without Ant. They need another guy. I mean, there's how many minutes a game that that Randle and Ant aren't on the floor together? It's probably 20-ish, right? If not more. So who's that guy going to be? And like Damian Lillard, I mean, there was mutual interest reportedly between Lillard and the Timberwolves. Like, that was something that was reported by the national media. John Krasinski of The Athletic reported that they talked, and I think Doogie Wolfson of KSTP mentioned that the Wolves and Blazers had, I think, what he called mutual interest in Lillard coming to Minnesota. But obviously, the 3 years, $45 million or whatever guaranteed money to go to, in 3 years, the security, coming off of an Achilles injury to go to Portland. I'd be surprised if Minnesota was offering that much. And then obviously the draw of the reunion is too much. So understandably, Dame goes to Portland. Like, there's been some other names. Bradley Beal obviously ended up with the Clippers, him being a name that was certainly mentioned as a Timberwolves possibility. So like, the Wolves have explored like a legit other option, a legit third guy from a scoring standpoint. Which tells me a couple of things. One, they understand the importance of having, which isn't a surprise, but they understand the importance of having another guy who can generate offense, who can play off of Ant or allow Ant to play off of them, because both Beal and Lillard on some level, and I'm just stating this. I'm not arguing. Like, I argued pretty strongly against Beal a couple weeks ago. Dame, I feel less strongly about. I think it would have been awesome. But there's also serious drawbacks, of course, defensively with both of those guys. But that shows what Minnesota realizes they need to do. It also shows, I think, and I guess we'll see what they do with this last roster spot, that it implies just what they truly believe the ceiling of Rob Dillingham is, and it tells me they're going to give him the opportunity to grab the bull by the horns this year. Or TJ Shannon. Again, it could be TJ. I think the ceiling of what Rob Dillingham can do, given the age and just the scoring touch and some of the stuff he can do off the dribble, I still believe Rob Dillingham's ceiling is higher than Terrence Shannon Jr., but the floor of TJ Shannon is much higher. Like, he already is a rotation caliber guy, and I don't feel confident saying that about Rob Dillingham, and I bet Chris Finch would agree with me. And of course, Rob Dillingham has the natural passing ability, some of that stuff that Shannon isn't necessarily supernatural with, but again, Summer League shows us that maybe he can do some of these things. I want to talk about specifics about Summer League and what that related to this last roster spot, and then also some of the names still out there that could be options for Minnesota here as we get into the waning hours of what we'll call the NBA free agency period. Not that guys can't sign in August, but I think we'll see a little bit more movement here as July kind of winds down. So we'll get into all that here next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our title sponsors over at Gametime. We've all been there, logging on early and waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show that you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping, and that is where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. You can save up to 60% off with their killer last-minute deals. If you're tired of endless scrolling trying to find the best deal, Gametime's zone deals pick the best seats in your section for you. Ever wonder what your view will actually look like before you buy? The app can show you a panoramic seat view, so there's absolutely no surprise. You know what you're getting yourself into. And with Gametime, perhaps the best thing is the price that you see is the price that you pay. There are no hidden fees. Plus, if your plans happen to change, the Gametime guarantee has your back with cancellation protection and more. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets and show tickets of concert and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA. That's LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. So this last roster spot, something we've talked about extensively on the show is, are they looking to fill the quote-unquote Garza role, or are they looking to fill the quote-unquote Nikhil role? The most obvious thing to me is to sign a depth big and believe that some combination of TJ Shannon, Rob Dillingham, and Jalen Clark can fill the Nikhil role. And even if you want to expand the rotation to 10 guys, which Chris Finch has mentioned kind of in passing as a real possibility, that they'll go from what was an 8-man rotation to a 10-man rotation. And those 8, 9, 10 spots are in some order, depending on the night, depending on performance, Rob Dillingham, TJ Shannon, and Jalen Clark. That's entirely possible. I think that's the most likely scenario. I just don't think that they're going to go into the season saying, all right, our fourth big is either 18-year-old Joan Barringer or it's Leonard Miller, who's been in the organization for 3 years. We clearly don't really trust him, and he's not a traditional big. I think Minnesota is going to add another big. That's kind of what I feel like where I feel like they're going to head. By the way, a wild card option there, and I don't think they'll do this, would be to give Jesse Edwards an actual standard contract. I mean, he's like 25. He's been in the organization now for a year, and then you find somebody else to add on a two-way. I don't think that's the route they'll go, but it's a possibility. And we'll talk about some big man names here in a minute. That to me is a very likely scenario. The other possibility is they go for the guy with the higher floor, and when they sign him, the idea is he's a rotation guy now, and you bump everybody else down a rung. Okay, so basically the opposite of what I just suggested. So like a name that's still out there that I've liked all along, and I'd be pretty excited if they got him, would be Malcolm Brogdon. Malcolm Brogdon is overqualified for what would basically be the ninth man role in Minnesota, eighth man role, whatever. But he's been so injury riddled the last few years that, he won 6th man of the year, 4 years ago with Boston. So Malcolm Brogdon, if they sign him, that immediately bumps down, at the very least. I don't know that it changes. I think TJ Shannon's going to play no matter what, but it may bump Dillingham and Jalen Clark down a spot in the rotation. Brogdon would then become a top 8, top 9 guy. And on the one hand, the upside of Malcolm Brogdon is still enough that, hey, he's not going to defend anywhere near the level of Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but is it really going to hurt your rotation that much to go from Nickeil to a Malcolm Brogdon? Honestly, I think Malcolm Brogdon gives you more offensively and enough of what Nickeil does defensively, and you still have Jalen Clark and TJ Shannon on that end. I actually think that would cover for a chunk of what you've lost with Nickeil. And you may still be able to do that with Shannon, Dillingham, and Clark, but there's just it's less of a sure thing because none of those guys have extended run as rotation pieces. And there's reasons why all of them wouldn't be rotation pieces, why you don't necessarily. So it's a little bit of the W do versus the W don't. Obviously, those three guys are in the organization, been part of the program for a couple of years and played last year for the team. And Brogdon, while he has a long track record as an NBA player, has been hurt enough the last couple of years and hasn't been part of the team. So, you don't know exactly what you're going to get, but he's a bit of a known quantity in terms of hey, we've seen what this guy can do if he's healthy. So that is the opposite, potential solution here. If the Timberwolves said, hey, we know we can backfill these minutes with Malcolm Brogdon, so we're going to go ahead and do that. And there are other names out there too, from a free agent standpoint, that would fall into the same category, right? Like, I don't know, there aren't that many that are attractive that I think would be real options for the Timberwolves, but there's certainly other guys out there that you could look at, like names we talked about before that are a bit of a different type of player, like not a point guard. D'Anthony Melton, right? Also coming off an injury, a more serious injury than Brogdon, and played even less last year because I think it was the Achilles early in the season. Other names, wing type guys like Amir Coffey is more of like a uh, a Josh Minot type player, a little bit more on the ball than Josh Minot, but like there's other ways they could go, or they could just go straight big, like I was talking about a little bit ago, like Precious Achiuwa I threw out there. Chris Boucher, a name I like potentially even more. Thomas Bryant, another one that, these guys are all guys that are looking for an actual rotation spot. And the Wolves would say, hey, look, we could give you Luka Garza's spot last year, which is not an every night rotation spot. It's a break glass in case of emergency. We know what you can do. None of those guys are score first type bigs like Luka Garza, but they all have rotation caliber skills. Like we know what Precious Achiuwa can do, and he's worthy of being on the fringes of an NBA rotation. But is that the type of big the Wolves want? Actually, I think kind of sort of yes. Like I wouldn't mind the Wolves signing Precious Achiuwa or Chris Boucher. I think they're both better options than Thomas Bryant. But again, I think all three of those guys are still hoping they find a team that gives them the chance to play a little bit more. And it wouldn't surprise me if those guys found a team that is a non-contender where they can play more minutes and just know that they could get bought out or traded before the deadline to a contender. Like, are they going to sign with Minnesota to be the 11th or 12th guy when they could go sign somewhere else and play, prove they can play, and ultimately still end up with a contender? I don't know. But that's still a possibility too. And in terms of Summer League, I don't know that we've seen a whole lot. Like Minnesota could take Summer League and look at it and say, okay, TJ Shannon has done exactly what we asked him to do. And again, still a game to play. But in 3 of the 4 games he played in, he scored 20 plus, he played in 3 of the 4 games. And in all 3 of those games, he scored 20 plus. He was relatively efficient, was good defensively, was great in the half court, or great in transition, better than maybe expected in the half court, both from a scoring and distribution standpoint. The assist to turnover was by and large there for TSJ. And the Wolves could say, look, we'll just give him this spot, this rotation spot. We'll give him Nikhil's spot. And if we want to expand to 9 guys in the rotation or even 10 guys, then Jalen Clark and Rob Dillingham are next man up. Or we could sign, one of these other names we talked about, a Gary Payton II. I don't think he's the guy, but because I think he's redundant with Jalen Clark. But do you sign somebody else then and have them compete for the 9-10 rotation spots? That's also a possibility. I think Terrence Shannon Jr. has done exactly what the Wolves have asked of him. And again, we'll kind of recap his summer league in a bit more depth next week. But he's the one that I think has done exactly what was asked of him. Rob Dillingham, it's been kind of more of the same. Like the most recent, the 4th summer league game when TJ Shannon did not play, Dillingham was a bit more impressive. There was more basketball to go around. He was definitely more in command of what was going on. He had 20 plus points with only, I think, 1 made 3 in the game. The assist to turnover was better. He had 7 boards. The defense, I think, has overall been really good. And I mean that. Like, I think the competition, or I should say, the compete level for Rob Dillingham on the defensive end of the floor has been very impressive in the summer league. So all those factors kind of go into this. Now, is Tim Connelly going to say, okay, these guys all did what they were asked in summer league, I'm not going to sign Malcolm Brogdon or whatever I was going to do otherwise? I don't think it's to that level, but I think it's a factor, right? It's like when you're prepping for the draft, you're like, all right, do I care what the scouting combine versus the scrimmage in the combine versus the, the individual workout versus the actual tape from college or the G League or overseas? Like, what are you weighing against each other? The in-person interview, like, it's all a factor. It all goes into the equation. Like, an NFL team isn't not drafting somebody strictly because of one, the shuttle drill or whatever at the combine. Like, there's plenty of different ingredients in it. There's different factors that you want to consider. And so Summer League is a factor. But I don't think the Wolves are changing their plans because someone did or didn't do what they were expected to do in Summer League. And by the way, I should also mention with Jean Beringer, I would say the same thing. Like, I don't think Minnesota's leaving Summer League good. All right, he's our 4th big. He can play the Luka Garza role. I don't think so. He had 1 great game and a couple decent games and maybe 1 kind of nondescript game. And defensively, I thought he was good overall, other than some foul trouble or foul issues in the final 2 games. or the most recent 2 games. Again, still 1 game to play tomorrow. I don't think they're taking this and saying, okay, this dude can be our Luka Garza this year. I also don't think they're looking at it and saying, oh man, we got to shift plans. I think they came into the summer league knowing they were going to have to figure out the 4th big spot and or this final rotation spot. And I don't think this has necessarily changed. If anything, I think the biggest impact that it may have had, the biggest influence would be feeling that much more comfortable about Terrence Shannon because he continues to rise to the occasion and do what's asked of him. Jalen Clark and Rob Dillingham didn't necessarily show a whole lot of growth. They were kind of more of the same. And I think TJ Shannon showed some growth. And I think that is the one thing that could provide a bit of impact on what's next. And again, we'll rehash that a bit more, or dig a bit deeper, I should say, Monday, Tuesday of next week. Let's close the show here next by putting a bow on this talk. What I think is going to happen next, we'll talk about the rest of the summer months and what's upcoming on the offseason calendar. It's all coming next. Today's episode of Locked On Wolves is brought to us by our friends at OpenPhone. If you are running a business, you know that every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you had an urgent need, maybe for a plumber or a service provider. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. And that's why you need OpenPhone. OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system built to streamline and scale your customer communications, all from an app on your phone or computer. OpenPhone lets you manage business calls and texts from a single app. The shared inbox feature is a game changer. Your team can jump into any conversation instantly without missing a beat. Plus, their AI agent handles after-hours calls, answers common questions, and captures leads so you never miss a customer. OpenPhone is offering my listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/LockedOnNBA. That's OpenPhone, OpenPhone.com/LockedOnNBA. If you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. Okay, so wrapping up the offseason, or wrapping up Summer League, kind of, sort of. Wrapping up this conversation that's tangential to Summer League, my prediction right now is that the Wolves fill 1 remaining spot. I think they find somebody who can fill the Minot/Garza role, somebody who's a little bit more big man inclined. It doesn't mean it's not going to be somebody like, I don't think it's Amir Coffey, but that type of an archetype player who can play maybe a little bit, like other bigs out there. Like, it's not going to be Al Horford. I don't think he's going to sign in Minnesota. I think he wants to stay East Coast, whatever. Maybe Golden State. Obviously, that's been the rumor for a while. I think it's more of a big, maybe it's somebody like an Amir Coffey that's a 3-4 like a Josh Minot was, or maybe it's somebody that's a 4-5 like a Thomas Bryant, or maybe it's a true big, like Achua or Boucher. I think those are real possibilities. I think Minnesota is just shallower there. Like, you can't go into the season with 3 bigs, one of whom is really just a small ball 5 and Naz Reid. So obviously Randle, Naz, and Rudy. And then a gap, and then a couple of 18-year-olds with Beranger and Zakarsky, who's on a 2-way, and Jesse Edwards, who's 25 but no NBA experience, really, also on a 2-way deal. Like, you have to have somebody else there. I just think roster balance wise, and with the way the Wolves want to play, which is generally bigger, their reliance on Rudy Gobert, I do think they just want some more insurance there. And it's not somebody who's going to get regular rotation minutes. I still think that last spot, or last 2 rotation spots, are a combination of the 3 guys we've been talking about with Shannon, Dillingham, and Jalen Clark. That's where I still think Minnesota will go. And obviously this could change at any point. They could wait till the final minute of the offseason. My guess is there's guys out there that are waiting for another domino to fall. And who knows, maybe now the Dame stuff and the Beal stuff, now that that's resolved, teams are going to act on the Russell Westbrooks and, all that, Chris Paul, and that all gets figured out here in the next couple of maybe even days, but probably weeks as we get into August. Typically that's how this will work, is there's a little bit more movement the rest of July. August, it cools down quite a bit. There's actually Eurobasket coming up in August. And if you missed it, Dante DiVincenzo is about to get Italian citizenship and play for Italy in Eurobasket. Nikola Jokic is going to play in Eurobasket. Like, there's going to be some combination of guys that are on the floor, NBA guys, for Eurobasket, which is upcoming. It's like at the end of August. And remember, Rudy did that the year he came to Minnesota. He played Eurobasket. He was banged up and a little bit, fatigued. He just wasn't himself the first couple months in Minnesota until he got his legs under him. And there was some lingering injury type stuff from Eurobasket. The report previously was he's not going to play this time around in Eurobasket. That was reported a few weeks ago. So at the moment, it looks like Dante DiVincenzo is the only Timberwolves player that will be playing at Eurobasket, as far as I've seen, which is a good thing. Obviously you want guys to be able to represent their country if they're able to, and if it works out, if it makes sense. And there's some guys who you even want that because you want them to get the reps. Like we talked before about Josh Minott playing representing, in international play. And some guys like that, like I think it was the Bahamas, if I remember right. I think overall it's a good thing, but obviously as an NBA fan, selfishly, you're looking at your team and saying, I don't want my guy to get too many miles on his body, too much tread taken off the tires doing this. And you also obviously don't want any significant injury or lingering stuff, even if it's minor, like what happened to Gobert a few years ago. So of course, I'm sure the Timberwolves front office feels similarly, where they're watching with bated breath, and hopefully, Dante can get himself into a rhythm maybe, and it's a good thing for him. Remember, last year it took him a while to be comfortable in the regular season in Minnesota. So that's upcoming in August, and then of course training camp mid-late September. And usually not a whole lot happens. You could point to like the James Harden trade right before the regular season when he went from OKC to Houston, 12 years ago, and then like the Randle DiVincenzo for Towns trade last September. Like how many, I know the Harden trade was in October. That's when the regular season started a little bit later. But you don't see very many trades of that caliber that late in the offseason. And we saw one just last year. Obviously, I don't think Minnesota's anywhere near doing anything like that this year, but something to keep in mind that anything could happen. My hunch is they still sign somebody at some point in the next few weeks here. And I think we're going to start to see a little more movement league-wide here in short order. A reminder, Summer League Timberwolves have 4:30 Central Time game tomorrow, Saturday. It's their quote-unquote consolation game. Summer League wraps up. The championship is late Sunday night. Monday, we'll do a bit of a post-game pod from Saturday. Between Monday and Tuesday, we'll do some overarching Summer League takeaways, get a bit deeper on all the guys that saw minutes. And it wouldn't surprise me if on Saturday we see less of and maybe none of TJ again. I don't know about Dillingham and Clark. Maybe we see Dillingham, but not Jalen Clark. Still only a couple years removed from the injury and stuff. Like, I don't know, but we may see a little bit more of maybe we see Babacar Sane, who we haven't seen yet. And I've been wanting to watch him play a little bit. Maybe we see more CJ Fulton, like guys that aren't usual normal roster guys that are maybe competing for an Exhibit 10 contract in training camp. So we may see a bit more of that on Saturday. So if that's the case, we'll certainly talk about that Monday. And then Tuesday will be like overarching takeaways. What did Dillingham's summer look like? What about Terrence Shannon? What about Jalen Clark? What about Jean Beringer? How do we feel about that going into, what's next, which is training camp in September? So a lot to get to early next week. And of course, we're still daily throughout the month of July. So we'll kind of go through everybody that's still out there in the free agent market, maybe have a couple of guests here over the final 2 weeks of July before we move to 3 shows a week in the month of August. That's all I got for you today here on the show. Big thank you for making Locked On Wolves your first listen every single day. Of course, this show is free and available everywhere. That includes YouTube, as well as all of your favorite audio platforms. Wherever you like to listen to podcasts, you can find Locked On Wolves. You can also watch on the Locked On Sports Minnesota app on both Roku and Amazon Fire TV. A reminder, for your second listen, you can check out the Locked On NBA show. Throughout the offseason, they've got you covered no matter what. Doug, Matt, Hayes, they'll keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, the remaining free agents, everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Of course, the Locked On Wolves podcast is part of that very same Locked On Network, your local experts on all the biggest stories. Once again, I'm Ben Beecken. This is the Locked On Wolves podcast, and we'll catch you next time.